Hello, this is Natalie Danielson from Professional Direction, and I am here today to interview Carrie Gendron, who's a real estate broker with Corcoran Real Estate in Bothell, Washington, and she's also licensed in Montana. Carrie's been an agent for more than 10 years, and she's an outstanding agent, award winning. She's passionate about real estate. She has a strong attention to detail, and she's really great at working with her clients. We're going to have a chat today about the buyer brokerage agreement that all real estate brokers in Washington are required to be using when they're working with buyers. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, glad to be here.
So the buyer broker agreement has been added to the law of agency. The law of agency is a real estate law in Washington state that defines our agency duties and representation with clients in Washington state. It was amended recently, and those changes became law in January of 2024. What they do is these changes, they define some aspects of the law, but most importantly, they require that when you're working with a buyer, that you get a buyer to sign a real estate brokerage services agreement, and that agreement protects the agents and the clients. It helps them understand representation, duties, compensation, and confidentiality.
Yep.
So one of the biggest challenges in our industry right now, at the beginning of 2024, is brokers are hesitant to pull out a contract and have a discussion with their buyer, their prospective buyer, about the buyer agency's laws and this agreement. Right?
I think there is some hesitation. Of course, anytime there's change, it's a big deal when there's a big change, and it feels really scary because it's law. But I just look at it like we've been signing listing agreements with sellers. So why is it any different to sign a contract with a buyer? Because we've learned how to do a listing presentation and talk through that and get really dialed in. It should be the same way with our buyers. It actually credentializes us, in my opinion, because it makes us have professional conversations that make us valuable. And so it wasn't scary for me because I've always been using them.
Yeah, so that's a good point. This is not a new document. There have been buyer agency agreements for decades in our Northwest MLS. So it's not a new document. There's been some changes to it, but this is not new. But agents just are afraid to speak to buyers about buyer brokerage. So what this agreement says, it says that the buyer's acknowledging they received a copy of the pamphlet on the law of agency. I'm guessing most agents haven't even read that. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't read it till I was studying for my managing broker exam. And then I read it and I was like, oh, wow, I need to up my game here. Now it's the first document that I send people. We have to sign a form 42 acknowledging receipt of it. So I have read through it. I send it. And I send it right away after I've done a CMA, or if I've had conversations. I go, hey, I'm required in the state of Washington to send you this. You're going to be asked to sign a form at some point that acknowledges receipt of this. So I send it right away. It's kind of a no-brainer now. I do it before I send a contract for signing, because that's when you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to send it with the contract so that they have to read through it when they're signing a contract for purchasing a home or selling a home. So I do it earlier now than I used to, but that was a new thing from taking your course and studying for the exam. I learned a lot that I wasn't doing well.
Well, the brokerage agreement, the listing agreement is a buyer brokerage agreement. And then the brokerage agreement acknowledges that they've received a copy of this. And so what's in it? The agents, honestly, they don't always read it. So it's important to know what's in it. It's not like a serious, scary pamphlet or something. It says that the agreement says that they've received a copy of the pamphlet, that the broker's appointed by the firm to represent the buyer. This is important. A lot of agents, I think, when they're talking to consumers about the buyer brokerage agreement, this contract thing that says that they will represent them, they take it so personally when they could say, it says here that I'm appointed by my firm to work with you, and that lifts a little bit off the personal aspect of it. It says whether it's an exclusive agreement with that buyer or not, whether the buyer is, it says that the buyer is consenting to dual agency, because you might show them a house in that's listed by your own office, the amount the firm will be compensated and how it will be paid, firm, and the term of the agreement and any other agreements between the buyers. So that's what the buyer agency agreement has on it, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And I honestly don't know why that's so scary, because it lends itself well. And one of the reasons why I've always used it is because I was in a situation where I had to kind of backtrack, and it was a for sale by owner. And I ended up having to have an awkward conversation with the buyer to pay my commission. And it all worked out in the end, but I remember walking away from that going, I never want to experience that again. And so I want to be upfront, like, in the event that the seller doesn't pay my commission, this form says that you're going to pay my commission. This is what I have it listed as. I do not have a problem having that conversation at all. And I think it's very important, because if I'm going to commit my time, I tell them that you're hiring me through my firm to represent you. And before I work hard for you, I just want to know that you're going to pay me. And then we kind of laugh about it and go, what other job do you work for free? I mean, it's kind of a, we just have to get away from what we have in our mind of, oh, you don't pay me as a buyer or as agent. The seller pays me. We have to get away from that and go, you're hiring me. In the event the seller doesn't pay me, you're going to pay me, and we're going to work it out. And I do say, I'm not going to stand in the way. My commission's not going to stand in the way of you getting your dream home. We're going to work this out.
That's
so
an
that
important
you
point. That's an important point.
I'm not going to make my commission, but let's set a standard right here, sign a contract. You're going to pay me, 2.5%, 3%, whatever you put in there. And then you tell them how they're going to pay you, because they're going to be like, where am I going to get the cash for that? And then I kind of explain, if we have to talk with your lender about some creative ways for my commission to be paid in the event that the seller won't. So
you try to negotiate with the seller.
yeah, I go, my job is to try to get the seller to pay it so that you don't have to. And if they don't, I'm not going to stand in the way of your dream home. And then I have never had anyone balk at signing that form for me, because I explain it really clearly and I explain it with confidence, because I don't want to work for someone with the risk of not being paid. I just don't. I'm at that place in my career where I don't want to run around and run the risk of making it easy for them and doing that soft sell of, hey, well, we'll make it non-exclusive, and I make it exclusive. I tell them what they're going to pay me. And then if they don't want to work with me and they want to fire me, then I let them off the hook, because chances are I don't want to work for them either at that point. So we just go our separate ways, and I move on and use my energy for a new client. But I'm not going to arm wrestle
They can
someone.
terminate the agreement at any time. And
Exactly.
yeah, so that's very important. Also, that the law says that you have to do it as soon as reasonably practicable, which is as soon as you are going to be performing brokerage services. And brokerage services, like even advertising yourself out by any solicitation or representation, advising, consulting, or counseling buyers. Right there in the law, it says that. So you should be letting these people know this is what's happening, and I'm going to be providing brokerage services. The money also, the compensation, it's still a whole part of the transaction. It's not like this person pays or this person pays. It's all a part of the transaction. It's not something new, or that the buyers are suddenly being added on a different cost. And before, it just came out of the totals for the whole transaction. So I think, it's just the way you explain it to people, I
It
think.
should be very clear to consumers. As a consumer, I want to know how someone's getting paid, where it's coming from. We should have no problem with disclosure, transparency, upfrontness, and confidence in the value that we add. It does get awkward, I will say, when you just meet someone off a sign call or something like that, and you're like, oh golly, I'm rendering brokerage services. I'm meeting them at a listing. I've never met them before. What do I do? In that case, you just have a contract for that address, and you just say, in the event that, I'm meeting you Essentially, you're hiring me to show you the house and offer brokerage services. If for some reason we write up an offer on this, I need to have a buyer agency agreement in the state of Washington. So I wrote it up for this address only, so I'm not saying you just met me 20 minutes ago online, you have to hire me. But for this house, if we write it up, yes, you do. You have to hire me because I'm meeting you.
I represent you. If you were to
Yeah.
walk into this house and there was an agent here that had it listed, they would be representing the seller and not you and your best interest.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too. So
Yes.
the pamphlet that we give out was rewritten from the pamphlet that we used to use. And I think it's easier to understand and clearer because it does talk about, for example, limited dual agency. What if I show you a house that's listed by somebody in my office, for example, there may be a dual agency situation, and it gives an opportunity to explain this to them. It also discusses all of the information about what is representation, what are my duties, my compensation and confidentiality. All that kind of information is in that pamphlet. So I encourage agents to read it.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to know what
That
the
would be
law
good.
changes are, read the pamphlet that you give to agents. Another thing that you mentioned too is the transparency. We were like one of the first states in the country that made the buyer brokerage compensation like transparent. This is how much the broker will get paid. And remember, brokers were just so upset about that, but it didn't change the way that we're working drastically in any way. But also, gosh, you go to an accountant, an attorney, or even your
Right.
doctor, and you have to
Right.
find out who pays, what it covers, what about confidentiality,
Yep.
all of our responsibilities. It's right there. I mean, you're ready to go into surgery, and they're bringing you the clipboard to sign. They're always making you sign things,
Right.
and for real estate, they're giving us confidential information about how much they make and where they work and what they
Right.
offer, and they should know that that's confidential and I'm representing you.
Right. No, I just think I like the professionalism of it. There isn't any other, I mean, it is a little uncomfortable with the expediency of it and the timing of it. Like, you have to kind of think through how you want to do that in awkward situations where you don't know the person and then you're rendering brokerage services. I just kind of go, well, what would I do with a seller that I didn't know? You might have a first meeting.
Mhm.
That's why they define it as within reason. Like, they can't define that for everybody because there's subjectivity, a little bit of subjectivity there, but you always have to have it in your mind. When is it going to be appropriate for me to authentically enter in with my professionalism? You don't ever want to hire an attorney or a service provider or someone when they kind of soft sell you. You like confidence. And I think consumers want confidence from us too. You hire me, I'm going to work hard for you. This is what it costs you to hire me,
Mhm.
and if the seller doesn't
Plus,
pay.
you just decide the agreement, and then you understand, and then we deal with it when it comes to the point of making an
Yes.
offer.
Yeah.
Because
So, and I
you're
don't
the
like surprises. I like them to be well informed and educated and understand it's not a difficult thing if you don't let it be. You can think through it.
I think also, now let me see what you think, but I think real estate agents, especially buyer brokers, when you're working with a buyer, don't always believe they're worth it. Like they
Yeah.
show a buyer like three houses, and I think most buyers buy one of the first three houses they see, but they show a buyer three houses and the buyer wants to buy it. They pull out a piece of paper, they write it up, and they suddenly get this huge commission. And I think that a lot of buyer brokers don't think they're worth it. Like they just don't think they're worth it when part of the ability to even work with that buyer is that you had to find them
Yeah.
and you had to work with them for the whole transaction. Whereas a listing, a lot of times they're doing a lot of work in advance, getting pictures, doing the CMA.
Yeah.
With a buyer, you're doing a lot of the work after
Mhm.
after you sign a transaction. What do you think? I think people just are afraid to tell people this is how much I'm going to get. I used to always just say this is how much the firm is going to get.
Yes, I just say that's our gross income. That's before the government gets a hold of it. That's before, I mean, you're seeing the full pot. That's not what I put in my pocket.
Mhm.
I just kind of say we make great money. That's why we're real estate agents. I don't know of any other profession where they have to justify their income. Yeah, I just do it. And if you just do it with confidence, and some people will try to, I've just found that the ones who are always trying to, like, you don't want to commit or they don't want to commit, I would rather use my energy with the people who want to commit and value me. I just don't want to chase anybody. And I guess maybe that comes with time in your career and really being dialed in with who I want to work with and who I don't. I have a real tight lane of how I want to do business. And that doesn't mean that I'm unreasonable or I don't work hard to earn trust with a client, but I am subjective about it. And if I get a sense of that person doesn't really value what I offer and I'm going to have to convince them that I'm worth it, I just would rather not make money in that transaction and use my energy for a new one. I just would personally. It's a dignity thing for me. Like if I don't feel valued, I don't want to work hard for that person. I
And
just
that
don't.
I think sets apart the experienced and successful agents from those that are either newer or don't have the confidence. I think that sets agents
Mhm.
apart. You know, you're making
Well,
a
we shouldn't
choice.
have to jump through all the hoops and prove and answer, get up at 5 in the morning and answer phone calls at 11 at night. I just am not a believer in that. I just set my standards and some will, somewhat won't. So what, move on. And we teach people how to treat us. And so I just get really defined with who I want to work with and who I don't. But I have to be willing to let go of some income. Have I lost some clients because of that? Absolutely. And actually it's been a relief
Mhm.
sometimes, you know. I'm it's just we've all learned that lesson.
We've all learned that lesson if you've been in the business for a
Yeah,
while. If you lose a client, it's usually a blessing.
it is. It just is. There's no money worth, like, I had one last year. It just took all of me and then it never even came to anything. It never sold. And it was exhausting. And I was like, I never want to do that. No money is worth what I went through for 6 months
Mhm.
trying to get something sold for a seller that wouldn't listen to me. And so if you're not going to value my opinion, then I really can't work for you. So
So an agent is presented with the opportunity to meet a buyer for the first time, and the buyer might have found them any different way. It doesn't matter. And they go to meet them, and this buyer wants advice and is thinking of they really like this house. Maybe they're meeting at the house, and the agent's showing them the
yeah.
house. Do you have any last suggestions for the agent who's a little nervous, who's got this, hopefully, the buyer
Yeah.
broker's agreement and the copy of the agency pamphlet in their possession? Do you have any suggestions for them to kind of be able to initialize the discussion with a new buyer?
Oh, I don't want to get in trouble here with my broker. Yeah, no. There is some subjectivity there. If you get a sense that they just wanted you to open a door and you're never going to see them again, I'm not sure that I would say, here, sign this contract for this house. If you sense that they're interested and they really love this home and you're walking through, before I left, I would have it signed.
And then
I
how, but
would
how
say,
do you initialize it? How do you pull it out of the briefcase, or
yeah, I mean, that's good. That's good stuff because that's what we're all afraid of. And you just do it
you just
before
do
they
it?
leave.
It's just like,
Before they leave, you
yeah.
just say, hey, on behalf of the state of Washington and my broker, I kind of like to blame it on my broker a lot. I'm required to have this form signed. I did label it and I explain it. It's just for this address. It sounds like you're really interested in it. I hope that you want to hire me. I would love to work for you, but let's just have this signed for this house. And then should you decide you want me to help you, if this doesn't come together, then we'll sign a different buyer agency agreement. But I'm required to have it in the state of Washington. So everybody is in the know of what's going on and who's getting paid and how it works. And I would just do it if I felt like they weren't just using me to see that house. If they
Mhm.
were going to close the door and move on and they already had another agent, first of all, you have to find out if they have another agent. I mean, there's that conversation to have because they might just be using you to open the door. That's where that subjectivity comes in. You just have to be professional about it. That's all I can say.
And know
If
whether you're
they
performing
have an
brokerage
agent,
services or just meeting them. Okay, so I really appreciate this discussion, Carrie. This is Carrie Jenner. She's with Corcoran Lifestyle Properties in Bothell, but also licensed in Montana, but we're talking about Washington laws today. So I really appreciate you signing on and giving us a little bit of information based on your experience and background.
Thank you. It's fun. I love talking about it. And I passed my managing broker exam because of you. So thank you.
Thanks. I love teaching those classes. Well, thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.